Welcome back, everyone. In 2015, Burundi was in a state of political crisis. The country's president was seeking a potentially illegal third term in office, and demonstrations erupted across the country. Among those protesters was activist Ketty Nivyabandi, who led women through the streets in peaceful protest.
And when her life and those of her children were threatened, she was forced to flee the country and seek asylum here in Canada. She has since continued her work as a human rights activist and is now the Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada. We are absolutely thrilled to have her on the show today. Welcome to The Social, Ketty.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Wonderful to see you.
I know you're coming to us all the way from Ottawa, just down the 401. Listen, we've got a lot of questions for you. We want to fit them certainly all in. As Lainey was mentioning, you led Burundi's first women-only demonstrations in 2015. It was in the middle of this political crisis in the country. Very dangerous time for everybody, a very dangerous thing to do, especially for women. So what still compelled you to go out and protest?
Well, the very fact that women were not present in the protests, it was the 17th day of protest, which had been met by brutal violence from the police, and yet the majority of the people on the streets happened to be men, young men, boys, and women were not there. So I thought it was critical for women's voices to be heard, particularly at such a critical time.
And those protests that you led, they were peaceful, and there's a photo of you in particular that gained traction online. So you are kneeling in front of a police water canyon. It was moments after protesters were met with a brutal response. What was running through your mind at the time?
It had been, I think, about 5 hours that we had been in the streets with women of all ages, all walks of life, and we had been met by such violence. A woman had fainted next to me. There were older women who were about 70 who had been, tear gassed, and I was outraged. I was so angry, and I wanted it to stop, and I wanted to tell the gentleman in that huge cannon that here we were, human beings just like him, and that he needed to put a stop to this. So it was my way to express the outrage that not only I felt, but the entire nation felt at the time. And it just happened naturally. I found myself kneeling down, putting the white handkerchief in the air as a sign of stop this.
And as we mentioned, you were eventually forced out of your country. So your life and also the lives of your children were in danger. You came to Canada. And you said, though, that seeking asylum here was one of the worst experiences of your life. Can you explain that?
Well, think about it, you're leaving the country that you love deeply, the country that has seen you grow. Your entire life is there. And as I say this, I'm thinking of people who are currently fleeing Ukraine. You're leaving everything behind you, a country that you were ready to die for, in my case. And you find yourself, now safe, physically safe, but unable to return to what you have lost. And I think it's actually when you arrive at the place of refuge that you begin to measure what you have lost and the magnitude of what has happened to you. So it was a very difficult time for me to admit to myself that I needed to be safe and needed to be protected by another country and to surrender my passport. I think that was the most painful part. I'm sure it is for any refugee.
Thank you for that perspective. And I think we want to continue on that train of thought because you say that in Canada, we misunderstand the difference between refugees in exile and human rights defenders like yourself in exile. So what distinction are we missing here?
Maybe let me start by clarifying that all refugees need support, obviously. Every person who is fleeing for their lives needs to be supported. And it's in no way to place a hierarchy on the needs or the magnitude of what one faces. I would say that the main difference is that a human rights defender, when they leave a country, not only are they removed from their environment, but they're also removed from their work. Human rights defenders uphold human rights for a living. This is what they do. And so when they arrive in another country, it is difficult for them to rebuild and to start, any other job, as often refugees do. Because what they really want to do more than anything else is continue to fight and to uphold for these rights. And generally, for them to be in exile means that those human rights are being violated at an enormous scale. So they're watching their work, disappear in many ways. And they're far away. They're not able to work on it directly. They don't necessarily have the support and the resources that they need to be able to do that. And so it is a very isolating experience and a very difficult one, and one for which many people are often not prepared to help. I think often people welcome you and think, yes, here you are safe, you can rebuild your life. But for a human rights defender, what rebuilding one's life is really continuing to work on human rights. And I think this is also why many dictators and repressive states are so eager to push human rights defenders out of their country, because they know that then the work stops and and they further silence any critique. So it's so critical to support human rights defenders who are in situations like these, like the one that I was in myself.
Your work is continuing, and it is astounding. You are the Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada, and your job is to help advance human rights and justice in Canada and beyond. But you say that there needs to be a very serious shift in the way that the international community is handling the repression of specifically women abroad. So how do we need to shift our approach?
I'll think that many ways. I mean, Canada has adopted a feminist, is currently thinking about a feminist foreign policy, and there's a feminist assistance policy that's been developed as well. I think one of the core things to think about is always, when we think about assisting women who are in other countries, it's really doing them from their context and taking their lead. There are women human rights defenders, women's organizations, vibrant movements on the ground who are already doing this work. So, it is not up for any country to come and reinvent the wheel. I think the support should be going towards those organizations and those movements and those defenders who are already doing that work, and letting them set the agenda and determine what kind of support they need. So that's the first thing to really keep in mind. The second thing I would say is to really get to the root causes of that violence. Often women's repression goes hand in hand with other things. So the same governments that are often repressing their rights may sometimes have a relationship with a country like Canada. Say if we're selling arms to a country like Saudi Arabia, which at the same time is violating women's rights, then we need to be coherent across the board. So that's one thing, really understanding the root causes and addressing those. And then thirdly, I'd say for women defenders like myself and like many, many others around the world right now who are doing this work, it's about really supporting them in the way that works best for them. Often when we help human rights defenders in danger, we do it from a very masculine perspective. We'll offer maybe for this person to be able to fly out and to leave, forgetting that for a woman, for instance, it's impossible for her to leave without her family or her children, or that her needs may be very specific and very different. So it's really about looking at it from the perspective of that woman and letting her again lead the way and tell you what it is that she needs, and honoring those needs and believing those needs and resourcing them. That would make a much more effective response to many of what these women are going through.
But whether it's abroad or here in Canada, the fact is that women's equality we have not achieved it. So as Secretary General of the Amnesty International Canada, what would you say is the greatest threat to women right here in Canada?
I would say, first of all, it's understanding that women in Canada are not equal. their experiences vary due to their race, due to their social class, their religion, their sexual orientation. All of these are factors that make very different experiences for women's rights. So it's really important not to think of women's rights as a one blanket or a one area that is that everybody experiences the same way, and really having that intersectional approach. That means understanding that a woman who happens to be a refugee, who happens to be Black, who happens to be Muslim, for instance, and who happens to have a particular disability, is experiencing a series of challenges and will have a very different experience from another woman somewhere else in the country. And so it's about meeting her needs, but really from that intersectional perspective. When you think about it, it is Indigenous women, racialized women, and religious minorities, and in particular Muslim women, who are really experiencing the most difficult circumstances in Canada. And they are the ones that we really have to start from. You know, we really have to start from their perspective and their particular needs. That's crucial. I would say really that is the perspective that we need to bring to the work in order to be meaningful and to make real changes. But outside of that, obviously, women face a range of challenges. Obviously, violence continues, especially domestic violence, sexual assault. Human trafficking is a key issue as well here in Canada, both of women and girls. And then, of course, the impact of COVID and the pandemic overall on women has been devastating. So all of these are really current and crucial challenges.
Ketty, what a pleasure and an honor to have you joining us here today and for sharing your story with us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for all the incredible work you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey there, what did you think? Drop your comments below and join the conversation. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can find more on everything from food and fashion to pop culture and current events. See you soon.